My name is Loretta Green. I'm 65 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family.
The moment I transferred $50,000 to fund a full family vacation, I truly believed I was a man who had done everything right. 20 years of effort, sacrifice, and patience, all wrapped up in the simple hope that my family could finally sit together without a single crack left between us. But when the flight confirmation email arrived, I froze. On the last line of passenger names, it wasn't me. It wasn't my wife. It was my son's mother-in-law. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. The feeling was colder. It was like touching a wall that had been silently cracking for years and suddenly realizing it had never belonged to you in the first place. Family tragedies don't strike with shouting matches. They strike in the moment you realize you've been silent for far too long. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I simply put the phone down, then picked it up again. And within 60 seconds, I erased every privilege, every support, everything I had built for them over 2 decades, things I once believed were the foundation keeping this family together. This isn't a story of revenge. This is the moment I realized I'd been living in a house with a leaking roof for years, and that day, I finally stepped outside, so I wouldn't have to keep shielding the rain for people who never once stood beside me. And that was the moment the curtain on our family tragedy was lifted. Not for them, but for me.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
There's a sound you never forget. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. It's the sound of the door closing behind you. I don't remember the exact moment my heart broke at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. What I do remember is the weight of my carry-on, the tightness in my shoes, and the way Brittany's lips barely moved when she said it. "There's been a small change," she said. "We gave your seat to my mum. She wasn't feeling well, and you'll understand." I blinked once, then again. I was sure I'd misheard. Surely I, Loretta Green, the one who paid for this $50,000 trip, wasn't being told, at the gate, that I no longer had a seat, that they'd given it to Odessa, Brittany's mother, a woman who once told me I dressed like a church secretary from 1985. Behind Brittany stood my son, Jason. He didn't say a word. He just looked off to the side, jaw clenched, hands in the pockets of the linen suit I'd bought him for the trip. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at them both, and suddenly the noise of the airport faded. The chatter, the roll of suitcases, the overhead announcements, all of it fell away. What remained was a chill that spread through my chest like a slow-moving fog. That was the moment I realized I had become invisible. Not old, not out of touch, not inconvenient. Invisible. I had paid for the flights, the rooms at the Four Seasons Maui, the private luau, the snorkeling lessons for the grandkids, the spa treatments for Brittany and Odessa, and even Jason's absurd luxury travel insurance that cost more than my monthly mortgage. I told myself it was worth it. That family was worth it. And now I was being told, calmly, coldly, that I wasn't needed, that my seat, my place, had been reassigned. "Jason?" I said, quietly. Just his name. He flinched, slightly, like a child who knew he was in trouble. But he still didn't speak. Brittany, always the PR queen, stepped in smoothly. "We figured you'd rather not deal with the long flight, Loretta. It's a lot on the body at your age. We were just thinking of you." Ah, there it was, wrapped in a pretty bow. The lie, the deflection, the gaslight. I could feel something inside me shift. It wasn't rage, it wasn't sadness. It was clarity, pure, focused, and final. I nodded once, very slowly. "I see." And I did. I saw it all. The years of being the reliable one. The ATM, the emergency contact, the free babysitter, the guarantor on loans, the down payment fairy, the never-say-no woman who always showed up with a casserole and a check. I saw how I had mistaken my usefulness for love. I took a step back, opened my handbag, and pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady, my heart surprisingly calm. I tapped the name I'd labelled Julian, emergency only. He answered on the first ring. "Loretta?" "Julian," I said. "It's time. Start the emergency reset. Full protocol." A pause. "All of it?" "All of it," I repeated. "Understood." I hung up. Jason was helping Odessa with her bag now. Brittany was adjusting her sunglasses on her head, checking herself in the reflection of the glass. They didn't even notice I had made the call. They didn't notice anything. I didn't cry. Not when they walked toward the gate, laughing. Not when the boarding group number was called. Not even when the agent scanned the ticket that should have been mine. I just turned and walked away. I found a quiet bar tucked away in Concourse F, near one of those overpriced airport spas. There were a few tired businessmen sipping bourbons and a woman asleep on a couch with her neck at an unnatural angle. I sat at the bar and ordered a neat Glenfiddich. The bartender looked me over like he wasn't sure if I was waiting on someone. "I'm not," I said, before he could ask. "I just need a drink." He nodded and poured. I took the glass, found a window seat, and sat with my back straight and my heart broken, but intact. Outside, their plane was pulling back from the gate. My phone buzzed. It was Julian. Jason's personal cards, frozen joint account, locked trust fund disbursement, suspended resort reservation, cancelled SUV lease, flagged for repossession. Then the final prompt appeared. Proceed with permanent deactivation of Jason's business credit line. I stared at it. I thought about the business I let him register using my home address, the LLC I paid to renew every year, the times I filed his quarterly taxes while he and Brittany were in Cabo networking. Then I pressed yes. A single tear slipped down my cheek. Not for the past, but for the version of me that tolerated so much to avoid being called selfish. I drank the scotch slowly, not like a toast, like a ritual. I didn't rush home. I walked the airport for an hour or more. I watched families embrace, children bounce, a teenage boy argue with his mum about screen time. It was life, unfolding. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't part of it as someone's afterthought. I was just me. I remembered the night I first felt like a mother. Jason was 3. He had the flu, and I sat beside his crib all night, holding a damp cloth to his head. I told myself that love meant giving until you had nothing left. Now I see that real love includes boundaries, because love without limits becomes servitude, and that's not love. It's sacrifice on autopilot. When I finally walked through my front door, the silence felt like a friend. My house smelled of lemon oil and lavender. The cat rubbed against my leg and then disappeared. I slipped off my shoes and made peppermint tea. Not because I was sad, but because I finally had the space to breathe. There were no missed calls, no sorry mom texts, and I didn't expect them. I repotted my little jasmine plant on the windowsill, humming a tune I hadn't remembered in years. My phone sat face down on the counter. For once, I didn't care what it might say. I sat on the sofa with my tea, looked around my quiet, clean home, and whispered into the silence. Let the gate close. Let it lock. I don't need it to open again. Because when people show you who they are, you believe them. And when your child shows you what you mean to him, you decide what you mean to yourself. And I choose peace. I choose dignity. I choose me. The moment their plane took off, I didn't feel sorrow, not the kind that makes you cry into your hands or gasp for air in a bathroom stall. No, what I felt was quieter, more precise, like someone had finally drawn a chalk line around the truth, and I was the only one willing to see it. I sat alone at a sleek little bar tucked above Concourse F, bourbon warming between my hands, watching the runway through tall glass windows. From up there, the whole world looked like it belonged to someone else. It should have been a happy day. The start of a luxury vacation I spent months planning, years paying for. A once-in-a-lifetime experience for my family. The kind of thing mothers dream of giving to their children. Instead, I was sipping overpriced liquor in an airport bar, freshly cut out of the very trip I'd created. Jason hadn't said a word when Brittany told me the seat had been reassigned. Not a whisper. Just stood there like a man without a spine while his wife threw me off a plane I'd paid for. He didn't even flinch. And Odessa, bless her cruel little heart, had the nerve to walk by and flash me a smile. A thank you for your sacrifice smile. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a habit. I had trained them for this moment. Trained them to expect my silence, my support, my savings. Trained them so well they didn't even realize they were discarding me. But this time, I wasn't going to clean it up. I pulled out my phone and opened Julian's message. My thumb hovered over the prompt. Confirm full freeze on all joint accounts? I pressed yes. Another confirmation appeared. Cancel resort booking? Yes. Suspend trust disbursements to Jason Green? Yes. Deactivate Jason's corporate card? Yes. Each tap of the screen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By the time I got home, the sun was a soft smear of pink across the sky. I walked into the quiet house, slipped off my shoes, and sank into my armchair like a woman coming down from battle. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check the fridge. I just sat, letting the silence fill the hollow places inside me. My phone buzzed again. It was Brittany. Brittany, 5:14 p.m. Hey, resort's saying the payment didn't go through. Can you call them real quick? No greeting, no apology. Just an assumption that I was on call, like a personal assistant with a wallet. Then a second message. Brittany, 5:22 p.m. The front desk won't let us check in without a card on file. Jason's card got declined. I set the phone down face up on the coffee table and let it buzz one more time before flipping it over. For dinner, I made myself a tuna melt and poured a glass of Chardonnay. The house was so quiet, I could hear the ice crack in the glass. By 7:30, the resort called. The concierge spoke with the kind of gentle concern that only comes from handling rich people's problems. Mrs. Green, I hope you're well. The Green family has arrived, but we're having a bit of trouble confirming the payment on the reservation. Would you like to place the charges back on your card? I closed my eyes. No, I said, calm and final. Cancel the entire reservation. None of them are authorized guests. There was a pause. She must have been waiting for me to offer an explanation. I didn't. Instead, I asked her to email me written confirmation of the cancellation. Then I ended the call, poured another glass of wine, and turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke early, out of habit, not need. The sky was still blue-grey, and the jasmine on the windowsill had bloomed in the night, a tiny reminder that life can blossom even in stillness. With my tea in hand, I opened my laptop and reviewed the bank activity Julian had flagged. The truth was worse than I expected. Not only had Jason and Brittany drained nearly $18,000 from the family account in the last 90 days, but most of it had gone to things I hadn't approved. Spa visits, high-end takeout, some retreat in Sedona that claimed to realign their souls using vibrational crystals. There was even a charge for a fertility meditation coach. I nearly spit out my tea. They weren't even trying to hide it. The final straw? A $2,200 custom luxury stroller for a baby they hadn't even conceived. I stared at the screen, heat creeping up my neck. This wasn't carelessness. This was audacity. The kind that only comes when people believe you'll never walk away. I called Julian. "Lock it all down," I said. "Not just the family account, the emergency fund, the asset reserve, the life insurance portfolio. Move everything to the holding account under my name only." "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "Yes," I replied. "And initiate the removal of Jason's name from the office lease. He doesn't deserve a building he uses as a status symbol while draining me dry." "Understood." "And Julian?" "Yes, ma'am?" "This isn't about punishment. This is about boundaries. I let things go too far. It ends now." Around noon, I took a walk through my neighborhood. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel your age in your knees and your purpose in your spine. I passed a couple of neighbors who waved, unaware that the woman they greeted had just flipped her life upside down. Or maybe right side up. When I got home, I made peppermint tea and opened the family photo album I hadn't touched in years. Jason, age 4, dressed as a cowboy. Jason, age 11, winning his first spelling bee. Jason, age 25, holding hands with Brittany at their engagement party, smiling like he had the whole world figured out. I touched the photo, running my fingers along the edge like I could trace my way back into his heart. But I knew better. He had chosen comfort over character, and I had allowed it. At 3:46 p.m., another text arrived. "Jason, 3:46 p.m. Why are you doing this? The kids are upset. Brittany's crying. Call me." I didn't respond. I opened the Notes app on my phone and wrote, "You think this is cruelty, but it's clarity. The lesson isn't that I stopped helping. The lesson is that you never learned to stand on your own." That night, I sat by the window with my tea, jasmine blooming beside me, and thought about all the times I said yes when I meant no. All the times I swallowed my truth to keep peace. But peace that comes from silence isn't peace. It's a slow erasure. And I'm done disappearing for people who wouldn't cross the street for me. While I sat in my sunroom, sipping peppermint tea and pruning the dead leaves off my jasmine plant, my family was 30,000 feet in the air, cruising above the clouds, completely unaware that the ground was already crumbling beneath them. I imagined Jason, headphones around his neck, scrolling through emails he'd pretend to answer later. Brittany probably had her blanket wrapped around her shoulders, whispering criticisms masked as concern. And Odessa? Lord knows she was already halfway through her second Bloody Mary, talking loud enough for the next 3 rows to know her daughter had rescued her from a life of disappointment. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the moment their wheels left the runway, their safety net had vanished. And I wasn't going to catch them this time. 30 minutes into the flight, the turbulence didn't come from the clouds. It came from the credit card terminal. According to the resort concierge, they had upgraded everything: first-class champagne on the plane, a luxury SUV waiting at the gate in Maui, in-flight purchases galore. All under the assumption that I was still holding the purse strings. But the card declined on the first swipe. Jason blinked at the flight attendant like the machine must have malfunctioned. "Try it again," he said, half laughing. She did. Declined. He handed her a second card. This one belonged to Brittany. Declined. That was when Brittany leaned over, raising her voice a notch higher. That's impossible. It's a platinum card. There must be a mistake. The attendant, bless her, stayed calm. I'm afraid the bank is rejecting the transaction, ma'am. Do you have another form of payment? Jason fumbled in his wallet. He hadn't carried cash since college. Odessa glanced up from her magazine. What's going on? Jason gave a tight-lipped smile. Nothing, Mum. Just a card glitch. But the tension was rising. Passengers were turning their heads. Brittany hissed at Jason under her breath. Did your mother forget to clear something? Why wouldn't she tell us? Jason pulled out his phone, opened the banking app, and froze. There were no account balances, no access, only a prompt. This user has been removed from this account. He blinked, hit refresh, same result. Brittany snatched the phone from his hand. What do you mean, removed? Jason didn't answer. His jaw clenched. That's when the panic started to settle into his features. He wasn't used to this. The uncertainty, the powerlessness. Because for 35 years, his mother had always caught him before he fell. But this time, I'd let him hit the floor. 30,000 feet below, I was cleaning out the fridge, throwing away half-used condiments, scrubbing the shelves. A peaceful kind of busy that reminded me I was still in control of my time, of my space, of my life. I thought about calling Julian to double-check the freeze on the resort card. Then I thought better of it. No need to hover. This wasn't a trap. This was accountability. Jason was a grown man. It was time he learned how it felt to be told no. Back in the air, the temperature inside that luxury cabin had dropped about 10 degrees, metaphorically at least. Odessa leaned across the aisle, her voice too loud and too nasal. What's the matter now? I thought Loretta was handling all this. She invited me, didn't she? Jason shook his head. She said she needed to handle something, but she didn't say. He stopped himself. He knew better. Brittany didn't. This is so typical. She makes this big gesture, and now she wants to embarrass us? Sabotage the trip she planned? Odessa snorted. Maybe she's finally snapped. I always said she was too high-strung. Jason turned to the window, face flushed. This wasn't going how he'd pictured it. He had imagined lounging poolside by now, cocktail in hand, posting a boomerang of Brittany spinning in her sundress while Odessa got pampered. He hadn't expected to be explaining declined charges to a flight attendant and getting side-eyed by other passengers. Worse, he hadn't expected the silence. Loretta wasn't answering her phone. The texts were left on read. No angry voicemails, no passive-aggressive emojis, nothing. It was the kind of silence that said, "Figure it out yourself." Meanwhile, I was upstairs folding laundry, pairing socks, smiling. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I finally wasn't. Hours later, they landed in Hawaii, sweaty, tense, already fraying at the seams. They stepped into the arrivals hall, expecting to see their driver with a sign, "Green Family, 4 Seasons." Instead, nothing. Jason tried calling the resort. No reservation. He tried again. Disconnected. Brittany pulled out her phone and dialed me. It rang once, then went to voicemail. Her voice trembled with forced calm. "Loretta, hi. We're at the airport, and there seems to be a problem. I'm sure it's just a mix-up. Please call us. Thanks." She hung up and looked at Jason. She did this on purpose. Jason shook his head. She wouldn't. Odessa cackled. "I told you that woman holds grudges like her pearls. This whole vacation was a set-up." Brittany's voice rose. "You said she was too generous, that she'd never pull back." Jason exploded. "Well, maybe I was wrong." Their fight drew attention. A group of tourists nearby looked over. A little girl tugged on her mum's sleeve and asked why the grown-ups were yelling. Jason stormed off to the rental car counter, only to be told his driver's license had expired and his credit card was declined. He slumped against a wall. For the first time in his life, he didn't have a solution, and I wasn't swooping in. That evening, I lit a candle in my kitchen and cooked myself a proper dinner: grilled salmon with asparagus, lemon rice, and a glass of Pinot Noir. I plated it like I used to when Henry was alive. I ate slowly, thoughtfully. The messages kept coming, but I didn't open them, not out of spite, out of peace. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the people you love fall, not to hurt them, but so they finally understand the weight you've been carrying all these years. And Jason? He was finally feeling it. When I opened my eyes the next morning, it was already past 7. That might not sound like much, but for a woman who'd spent the last 20 years rising before dawn to make everything work for everyone else, it felt like sleeping in at a 5-star resort. I stretched in my bed, sunlight pouring through the sheer curtains, and for a moment, I thought about them. Jason, Brittany, Odessa, the kids. I imagined them stepping off the plane in Hawaii, sweaty, disoriented, tired from the long flight, expecting a chilled towel, a garland of fresh flowers, a bellhop holding up their last name on a plaque. Instead, they would find chaos, because paradise doesn't welcome those who arrive entitled. Around 9:30 a.m., my landline rang. Not the cell phone. The old-fashioned landline with a cord that still hangs in my kitchen like a memory. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my cell buzzed. Unknown number. 4 Seasons, Maui I picked up. A young woman on the other end introduced herself as a concierge. "Mrs. Green, we're calling to confirm that your reservation has been cancelled." "Yes," I said. "Well, ma'am," she continued, "the guests have arrived and are claiming a mistake. Would you like to reinstate the booking or authorize a temporary hold?" "No," I said again, calmly but firmly. "The cancellation is correct. No authorization should be given. No services rendered under my name or account." There was a pause, the kind where you know the person is trying to find the polite way to say, "What on earth is happening?" Then she replied, "Understood, Mrs. Green. We'll inform the guests." I thanked her and hung up. Then I stood in my quiet kitchen, made myself a toasted bagel with cream cheese and fresh strawberries, and sat down to enjoy it, alone, in peace. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Jason stood in the resort lobby with a sheen of sweat clinging to his forehead. His shirt stuck to his back, and the bags under his eyes weren't just from the flight. He was unraveling. Brittany was at the front desk, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin, furious line. "This has to be a mistake," she insisted. "My mother-in-law made the reservation. It was all prepaid. Ocean view suites, spa packages, activities for the kids, everything." The clerk tried to remain composed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mrs. Green confirmed the cancellation personally this morning. The system has locked the booking. There's nothing more we can do without a valid form of payment." Jason looked down at his phone. Still no messages from me. He tried to call. Straight to voicemail. Odessa, never one to let a moment pass quietly, exploded. "I flew all the way out here for this. You dragged me onto that cramped plane, promised me paradise. And now I'm standing in a lobby like a homeless woman." Jason rubbed his temples. "Mom, please, don't mom me," she snapped. "Your wife said this was all taken care of. And where is your mother, huh? Sipping cocktails on a beach while we look like fools?" "She's not answering," he muttered. Brittany snatched the phone from his hand. She's doing this on purpose. This is some weird power trip. You need to fix it, Jason. I can't, he shouted, louder than he meant to. Everything's locked. The cards, the accounts. I don't even know how she did it. Because she's vindictive, Odessa said flatly. No, Jason replied, almost too quiet to hear. Because she's done. Back in Georgia, I was in the garden repotting one of my succulents when a text came through. Jason, 12:04 p.m. We're stuck. The hotel won't let us in. Can you please call me? I stared at the message. Then another one. Brittany, 12:15 p.m. This is humiliating. We're literally being kicked out of the lobby. What are we supposed to do with the kids? I set my phone down on the patio table, not out of cruelty, but because I had nothing left to give. For years, I had fixed everything. Covered for Jason's bad decisions, paid for Brittany's impulsive projects, tolerated Odessa's cutting remarks. I had stretched myself thin until I didn't recognize my own life anymore. Now, they were facing the consequences of their own choices, and I wasn't rushing in to shield them. And surprisingly, that didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel whole. I sat back, took a long breath, and let the sun warm my skin. The jasmine next to me was blooming beautifully. I thought of Henry. What he'd say if he were sitting across from me right now. He would have squeezed my hand and said, "About time, Loretta." I smiled. Across the ocean, Jason was pacing the sidewalk outside the resort, while Brittany argued with Odessa in a swirl of raised voices and fraying tempers. Jason finally stopped and sat down on a bench, elbows on knees, head in hands. He realized, for the first time in his adult life, that he had no backup plan. There was no, "Mum will handle it." There was no check coming in the mail. There was just him, and the consequences of years of complacency. He looked up at the clear blue sky, the same sky he used to gaze at as a boy in our backyard, asking me if clouds moved faster when you chased them. I used to tell him, "The ones worth chasing usually don't come back." That evening, back in Georgia, I was lighting a lavender candle when one final message buzzed through. Jason, 7:42 p.m. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would get this far. I don't know what I thought. I read it once. Then again. But I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my eyes and whispered, "I know, baby. That's the problem." And then I let the phone go dark. I never thought I'd see the day when my daughter-in-law would post a video complaining about mildew and low thread count sheets. But there she was, Brittany Green, sitting on the edge of a motel bed in what looked like a floral print house of horrors, fighting tears and Wi-Fi. The caption read, "We were abandoned. This is not what we deserved." I had to laugh. Not out of cruelty, but from the sheer audacity of it all. They had flown to Hawaii expecting luxury, 5-star dining, infinity pools, couples massages. Instead, they found themselves at the Paradise Palms Inn, a place that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since Y2K. The footage said it all. Buzzing neon lights, a vending machine from 1987, a stained ceiling with a slowly turning fan that made a sound like a dying cricket. Brittany zoomed in on the carpet, whispering dramatically, "I think it's moving." It was poetic, really, because entitlement always looks best under harsh fluorescent light. While they adjusted to their new reality, I was home in Georgia, pouring hot water over fresh mint leaves I'd picked from the garden that morning. I added a splash of honey and sat in my favorite armchair, the one with the faded cushion and creaky arms that Henry used to sink into after long days. I took a sip, watching the steam rise, and let the silence wash over me. Not a single part of me missed them. Not their noise, not their needs, not their constant draining of my spirit like it was their birthright. I had given for decades. I had said yes until I didn't recognize the sound of my own voice saying no. And now, the echo of that first no was shaking the ground beneath their feet. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. Brittany, 2:16 p.m. We're stuck in a literal roach motel. The kids are crying. Odessa's having a fit. We don't deserve this. Please call me. I didn't. Instead, I watered my ferns and put on a Miles Davis record. There was something delicious about letting the music fill every corner of my house while their complaints bounced off the walls of a motel room painted in what could only be described as decaying banana yellow. It was ironic, really. Brittany had once mocked my house for being too quiet. She said it made her feel like she was in a museum. Now she was in a place where the silence came with creaking pipes and cockroach lullabies. Around 5 p.m., Odessa finally cracked. I got a message from her I didn't expect. Odessa, 5:03 p.m. Loretta, I don't know what your son and his wife did to offend you, but I did not sign up for this. I was under the impression that this vacation was your gift to the family. If I had known otherwise, I would have stayed home. I'm booking a flight back tomorrow. Alone. No apology. No humility. Just a passive-aggressive declaration that she was removing herself from the mess, after playing no small part in creating it. I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I finally understood that silence was my power. That evening, I baked a small lemon cake, just for me. I hadn't baked in months, maybe years, for myself. I used to bake for the grandkids, for birthday parties, for Brittany's baby showers and charity luncheons. But this cake, this one was mine. While it cooled, I took my tea to the front porch. The sky was painted in strokes of apricot and lavender, and the jasmine vine was clinging to the railing like it belonged there, like it always had. I sipped my tea and breathed deep. This was what freedom tasted like. Clean, green, and mine. Jason's message came just after sunset. Jason, 7:12 p.m. Mum, we're falling apart out here. Odessa left. Brittany's unraveling. The kids keep asking what's going on. I'm trying to hold it together, but I need to understand why you're doing this. Please. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking to talk. That last part, I'm not asking for money, made me pause. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't trying to negotiate. He was reaching for something human, a connection, a truth he hadn't wanted to face until the rug was pulled from under him. Still, I didn't respond. Not yet. He hadn't earned the answer. Not while he still believed that accountability was cruelty. Not while Brittany was still spinning narratives online. I did, however, check her page again. She'd posted another video. This time, she wasn't crying. She was furious. It's not about the money, she began, pacing the tiny motel room. It's about being blindsided. We made sacrifices to come on this trip. We trusted someone close to us, and now we're being punished like children. In the background, one of the kids could be heard saying, "Is Grandma mad at us?" My stomach twisted, because I wasn't. Not at them. But Brittany. She heard the question and ignored it. Instead, she looked straight into the camera and said, "This isn't over." And maybe it wasn't. But it was the beginning of something new. Because when I turned off the video, I didn't feel the urge to explain or defend or swoop in to comfort anyone. I finished my tea, cut myself a slice of cake, and wrote one line in my journal. When people show you what your love means to them, believe them, and adjust accordingly. Somewhere across the ocean, Jason lay in a lumpy bed, staring at a ceiling dotted with water stains, trying to piece together how his mother, the woman who had always caught him, was no longer standing below with open arms. And me? I was finally learning how to stand on my own 2 feet again. I always thought the most dangerous kind of lie was the one someone told with a straight face. But I've since learned that there's one worse than that. The kind told with a trembling lip, a cracked voice, and a camera angled just right to catch the tears. Brittany had finally gone viral. It started with a notification from Nadine, my oldest friend and favourite no-nonsense woman on the planet. She texted me just before 11 a.m. 3 words I'd come to expect whenever Brittany had done something particularly unhinged. She did it. Attached was a link. I hesitated for a second before clicking it. But curiosity is a funny thing. It'll get you every time, especially when you've been cast in someone else's drama without signing the script. The video was titled, "When Family Betrays You, The Truth About Our Hawaii Trip." She had the audacity to use a broken heart emoji. The video started with Brittany sitting on the edge of a cheap motel bed, the kind with burnt orange comforters and a scratchy polyester texture you could hear in the background as she shifted. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun. No makeup. Well, except for a little concealer and mascara. The vulnerable look. A classic. She sniffled once. Then again. "I didn't want to make this," she said. "But we're desperate." Jason was in the background, silent. His face had gone pale, his posture hunched. He looked like a man who'd just realized the train he'd been riding for years had finally derailed, and he was still holding a first-class ticket. "We came to Hawaii for a family vacation," Brittany continued. "We were promised everything would be taken care of. My husband's mother, someone we trusted, paid for the trip, booked the hotel, planned everything, or so we thought." I blinked. Trusted? This was the woman who handed my seat to her own mother and said, "It just makes more sense." But Brittany was already wiping a tear. "We landed here, and everything was gone. The hotel was cancelled. Credit cards frozen. We've been living in a 2-star motel with our kids for 4 days. We've run out of money, of options, of hope." She looked straight at the camera. "She cut us off completely, and we don't even know why." Then the fade to black. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers didn't move. My heart didn't race. My breathing didn't quicken. Because I knew what this was. This wasn't a plea for help. It was a trap. The kind meant to trigger guilt in the audience. And in me. To turn my boundaries into betrayal. To paint me as the cruel matriarch who left her poor family to suffer in the tropics. I closed my laptop, walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. Then I reopened the laptop and began gathering evidence. Julian had emailed me every transfer, every document, every approved transaction with Jason and Brittany's name on it for the last 3 years. I had spreadsheets, screenshots, and digital trails so clear they could have been shown in a courtroom. I didn't just fund the trip to Hawaii, I funded fertility treatments Brittany never completed. I paid for the $1,200 stroller she later sold online. I covered the retreat in Sedona, the business class upgrade to Cabo, the aromatherapy subscription boxes, the $400 juicer that now sat untouched in their garage. And let's not forget the $7,800 withdrawal labeled education that actually went to a luxury writing retreat Brittany had hoped would launch her memoir career. There was no memoir. There was no career. There was just a well-documented pattern of taking and spinning, until truth bent under the weight of entitlement. I didn't rant. I didn't call names. I recorded a 3-minute video. I sat on my back porch, wearing my softest sweater and no makeup. The golden light of late afternoon washed across the garden. The birds were singing. The jasmine was blooming. I looked straight into the camera and spoke. "Hi, my name is Loretta Green, and I don't usually make videos like this." A pause. But since my daughter-in-law decided to bring our private matters into the public eye, I feel I have the right to respond with clarity and grace. I lifted a folder. In this binder are records, bank statements, wire transfers, and receipts of the support I've provided my son and his wife over the last 5 years. I didn't show numbers. I didn't gloat. I simply read. Private school tuition, car repairs, fertility appointments, vacations, home upgrades, emergency bills, late fees, groceries, therapy sessions, loan co-signatures, legal consultations, designer bags marked as business expenses. I looked up. This trip was the last gift I gave them. When I learned that my seat, paid for with the last watch my late husband gave me, had been reassigned to my daughter-in-law's mother, I realized something painful, but necessary. I leaned forward. My love was no longer seen as love. It was seen as a service. A breath. So, I stopped the service. No bitterness, no vengeance, just truth. I uploaded the video. Then I turned off my phone and made a cup of peppermint tea. By evening, it had been viewed over 80,000 times. The comments poured in. Its grey hair gracefully. She is the definition of elegance under fire. Millennial mama. She funded your whole life and you went online to shame her. Girl, be serious. Truthsayer 88. I felt this in my soul. Loretta, you are a lighthouse for the rest of us. Brittany disabled comments on her video, then deleted it entirely. Jason didn't post anything. But at 10:17 p.m., I got a message. Jason. Mum, I saw your video. I didn't realize how far we'd pushed you. I'm not asking for anything. I don't know how to fix this. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Because some lessons only sink in when the silence gets heavy. And I wanted him to carry the weight of it for a while. Later that night, I sat with my journal under the soft lamplight of the reading nook I hadn't used in years. I wrote, "They told their story with tears. I told mine with truth. One of us will sleep tonight. The other will scroll through comments in the dark." And I closed the book. With peace in my chest and boundaries intact, I went to bed. Alone. But never again. Abandoned. There's a difference between letting go and giving up. Letting go requires strength. Giving up comes from fear. For most of my life, I couldn't tell the difference. I thought being a good mother meant holding on through every storm, every failure, every heartbreak Jason created for himself and handed to me like it was my job to fix. I held on because I thought if I let go, I'd lose him. But by holding on too tightly, I'd lost myself, until now. It was a Wednesday morning when I decided to sell the office building. A red brick property on Crescent Drive, with sun-bleached blinds and a cracked leather couch in the lobby. Nothing glamorous, but it had potential. I bought it 22 years ago with the intention of turning it into my own accounting firm. But life, as it does, had other plans. Henry got sick. Jason needed help. Brittany wanted to launch a business that never made it past the Instagram handle. So I let them use the space. For free, of course. Jason called it his headquarters. I called it my biggest mistake in real estate. Because for 4 years, it became a monument to his delusions and my guilt. He never paid rent, never cleaned, never brought in a single client I could name, but he had a nameplate on the door and thought that made him a CEO. Now, that house of cards was coming down. Julian met me for coffee at our usual spot, the same cafe where we'd drafted my will, set up my retirement plan, and talked through every major life decision since Henry passed. He didn't even open his laptop this time, just sipped his Americano and waited. "I'm ready," I said. He nodded. "The sale will be smooth. There's a buyer lined up already. You'll come out ahead. Are you sure you don't want to give Jason more time?" "I've given him years," I said. Julian didn't argue. He just opened his phone and forwarded the lock change order to the building manager. "Tomorrow, 5 p.m. sharp," he confirmed. That afternoon, I composed the message. I read it aloud once. Then I pressed send. Loretta, 20:03 p.m. "You have 24 hours to collect your belongings from the office. The building is being sold. The locks will be changed tomorrow evening. The lesson is free. The tuition is expensive. There were no threats, no apologies, no emojis. Just the sound of a bridge no longer offering passage." He didn't reply. But the read receipt confirmed what I already knew. He'd seen it. Jason was never one to respond right away when the power shifted. He liked to pretend he was still in control, even when the walls were collapsing around him. But this time, he couldn't fake his way out. I drove by the office the next morning, just before lunch. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat at the corner and watched. Jason's sedan was parked out front. The trunk was open. He stood by the doorway with a cardboard box in his arms, moving slowly, like every step hurt. It was the first time I'd seen him since the airport. His shoulders sagged. His hair was a little longer. He looked like a man who had finally realized the oxygen tank was gone, and he'd have to learn how to breathe on his own. Part of me wanted to roll down the window, say something, anything. But I didn't. Because some moments don't need words, they just need to be lived through. Back home, I opened the last folder Julian had sent. It was the lease agreement for the SUV Jason and Brittany had been driving around like royalty, registered under my name, with payments debited from my account every month like clockwork. Brittany once called it their executive family car. I called it the last straw. Julian had already submitted the cancellation. A tow company would pick it up by the end of the week. The note read, "Scheduled for repossession, Friday, 10:30 a.m. Notify current user in advance if you wish. Otherwise, vehicle will be retrieved without notice." I didn't notify them. Let the beep of the flatbed truck be their wake-up call. That evening, I poured a glass of red wine and sat on the back deck as the wind danced through the mint plants and the sky turned from gold to navy. At 6:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. Jason. I cleared out the office. I didn't know what else to say except thank you, even if it doesn't feel like I deserve it. There it was. No defensiveness, no guilt trip. Just a simple acknowledgement. Quiet. Almost tender. He wasn't asking to come back. He wasn't blaming me. He wasn't demanding anything. He was just present. It caught me off guard, the way his words carried the weight of a man beginning to reckon with himself. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because growth needs space. And I wanted him to sit with this lesson for more than a minute. 2 hours later, Brittany sent her own message. Brittany, 8:43 p.m. You've made your point, Loretta. We get it. But the kids miss you. Maybe next time think about how your silence affects them too. Still no apology. Still no ownership. Just guilt. Always guilt. The kind that dresses itself as concern, but only shows up when power shifts. I didn't respond. But I opened my notebook and wrote, "She thinks I dropped a bomb. But I only stopped funding the shelter they never appreciated. Let the rain in. Maybe then they'll learn how to build a roof." The next morning, I made lemon tea and walked barefoot through the dewy grass in my backyard. The air was cool, the world quiet, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was perfect, but because finally I wasn't pretending anymore. Jason's house of cards had fallen, and now, standing among the ruins, I saw the foundation of something stronger: truth. There's a moment, right after you stop saving someone, when the world goes unnervingly still. You wonder if you've gone too far. If maybe, just maybe, this time, you broke something that can't be fixed. But here's what I've learned. You don't break people by saying no. You break them by letting them believe yes is infinite. It was a Thursday when my phone rang. I was in the garden, pruning back the lavender, letting the bees hum around me like tiny ministers of peace. The sun was soft, the wind cool against my arms. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Jason or Brittany or consequences. I was just present. And then the screen lit up. Jason. I stared at it, let it ring once, twice. Part of me hoped it was another silent text, another unread voicemail. But I answered. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. Mom? It was the first time he'd called me that in a tone that wasn't performative or defensive, just small, human. I'm not asking for money, he blurted. I need to talk to someone who doesn't lie to me. Or for me. He told me everything, not in a dramatic, overdone way. No, it came out like a confession muttered into a cold church pew. That morning, he and Brittany had a fight. A real one. Not the kind with slammed doors and dramatic threats, but the kind that ends something. She said I was spineless, he murmured. Said I let you run our lives, then acted shocked when the rug got pulled. There was a pause. A sigh so heavy it felt like years were behind it. She told me to sue you. Said I had a right to the office, the car, the vacation. Said we should do a podcast. I didn't laugh, but I smiled. And? I asked. And I told her to leave. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. She threw her shoes at the door and took the Uber with the kids to her mother's. I haven't heard from them since. My hand went instinctively to my chest, not from pain, from release. He'd finally opened the door and stepped into the storm, alone. I don't even know who I am anymore, he admitted. Without your money, without the performance. I've been pretending for so long, I can't even remember what it feels like to do something that's mine. I swallowed hard. Jason, you're 39. You're not broken. You're untested. I know, he said. That's what scares me. His voice cracked. And for a second, I saw him. Not the man who blamed, who demanded, who wore arrogance like cologne, but the boy who once stood in our backyard holding a kite he couldn't launch, frustrated that the wind wouldn't listen. Now he was listening. Mum, I don't want a check. I don't want a shortcut. I want advice. What do I do now? For the first time in this entire unraveling, I didn't feel the need to lecture or scold. My heart, tired as it was, didn't ache in resentment. It just beat, solid and steady. You stand still, I said. Let the dust settle. Let silence teach you. You don't rush your way into redemption, baby. You build it, brick by brick. He didn't speak right away. Then softly, thank you. Click. He hung up first, and that, oddly, was the most adult thing he'd done in years. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anxiety, from clarity. He was finally asking the right question, and that meant I had to offer the right kind of answer. Not a bailout, not a rescue, a resource. The next morning, I wrote to Julian. Subject: Rebuilding Julian. Find me a credible online business course. Financial literacy, leadership, operations, Whatever it takes to give someone a real toolkit, not fluff. Real skills. I'll pay for the enrollment. It'll be in Jason's name, but the rest is up to him. Also, I want you to handle the back end. No contact with him unless he finishes the course. Loretta. It was the first time I invested in Jason without trying to control the outcome. Then I sat down to write him a letter. A real one. Not a text. Not an email. I pulled out my favorite pen and the blue stationery I'd been saving for something that mattered. Jason, you asked what to do. Here's your first step. Learn what you were never taught. The enclosed login gives you access to a course I've purchased in your name, not as a gift, as a challenge. You don't owe me results. You owe yourself effort. If you complete it, you'll have tools. If you don't, you'll have excuses. Either way, the road ahead is yours now. This is not about becoming the man I wanted you to be. This is about becoming the man you were supposed to be before all the noise got in the way. Mum. I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I packed a small suitcase, booked a flight, and flew to Tuscany the next morning. Not to escape, but to give the lesson space to land. In Lucca, I stayed in a rustic villa with terracotta floors and thick green vines climbing the stone walls. I took a watercolor class from a local artist named Graziella, who smelled of linseed oil and sang to herself as she painted. I painted vineyards. I painted a lone chair beneath a fig tree. And one afternoon, I painted a woman standing at a train station, no luggage, no map, just a compass in her hand. She looked like me. Back home, Jason had the compass too. Whether he used it wasn't my burden anymore, but I had given it. And that was enough. People think offering an olive branch is an act of surrender, but it's not. It's strength. It's saying, I still have the power to build a bridge, but I'm no longer going to cross it for you. And so there I was, thousands of miles from Atlanta, standing on a small stone balcony in Tuscany, holding that branch in my hand, figuratively and literally. A soft wind passed through the olive trees like a whisper, and I realized I wasn't running anymore. I was ready. The days in Lucca passed without urgency. I woke to birdsong instead of alarms. I painted without purpose, journaled without deadlines. My hands, once used to gripping spreadsheets and steering wheels, now held brushes and wine glasses. One afternoon, I sat under the vines with Graziella, my art teacher, who had become part artist, part therapist. She was plump, loud, and completely uninterested in anything I couldn't say in colours. You paint pain like you've made peace with it, she told me, squinting at a canvas where I'd drawn a tree split down the middle, half burned, half blooming. Maybe I have, I replied. She didn't ask more, just handed me another brush. I thought about Jason every day, but not with that sick weight I used to carry. It was lighter now, like an ache after a wound has closed. You still feel it, but it no longer controls you. And in that clarity, I knew what I had to do. Not a rescue, not a reward, a resource. That evening, I sat at the weathered wooden desk in my bedroom, light from the Tuscan sunset pouring through the open windows, and wrote him a letter. Not the kind of letter a mother writes when she misses her son, the kind she writes when she finally loves herself enough not to be manipulated again. Jason, you asked me what to do next. Here it is. I've enrolled you in a 6-week online business course. It covers leadership, budgeting, operations, the things I once did for you so you wouldn't have to learn. That was my mistake. This is your chance to correct it. It's already paid for. The login details are below. No one will chase you to complete it. No one will praise you if you do. If you want a future that doesn't depend on your last name or my bank account, you'll earn it. If you don't finish it, There's nothing more to talk about. This is not revenge. This is responsibility. I am still your mother, but I am no longer your foundation. Use this tool, or don't. But know this. I gave you my best years. Now I'm giving myself the rest. Mum. I mailed it the next morning. No shaking hands, no second guessing. Then I walked to the market and found a leather-bound journal stitched by hand. Thick, cream-coloured pages, a brass clasp. It felt honest, like something that deserved substance. I bought it, but didn't send it. Not yet. Some gifts come with conditions, not out of cruelty, but because readiness matters more than need. 3 days later, a message came, a screenshot of Jason's course dashboard. Module 1, complete. Underneath it, a message, Jason. This is harder than I thought, but it's the first thing I've done in years that's actually mine. I stared at those words longer than I'd like to admit, not because they shocked me, but because they didn't. Maybe I'd always believed he could rise. I just hadn't believed he would, until now. I waited a full day before responding, not out of pride, out of clarity. I needed him to know this was his momentum, not mine. Me. Keep going. You've got more in you than you think. I see you. Short, direct, powerful, like the woman I'd become. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from worry, but from the quiet joy of letting go and still feeling whole. I walked barefoot out to the vineyard behind the cottage. The moon sat heavy over the hills, and the rows of vines reached out like old friends. I stood still, closed my eyes, breathed deep, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like someone's wife, or someone's mother, or someone's ATM. I felt like Loretta, just Loretta. When I returned to the house, I pulled out the journal and opened to the first page. In careful cursive, I wrote, "For the man who decided to begin again, may these pages hold your truth, raw, unfiltered, yours." Then I closed it. I would wait for the right time to send it, when he wasn't just completing modules, but building momentum. The next morning, I joined a wine tasting hosted by locals in a vineyard nearby. We sat under hanging lights, plates of cured meats and cheeses in front of us, and laughed in broken English and Italian. For once, no one asked me about my past. No one needed me to explain anything. I was just the American woman with paint on her hands and peace in her eyes. And God, that was enough. Before heading back to my room that night, I stood on the terrace one last time, wind kissing my skin. I whispered, not to the stars, not to the wind, but to the part of me that once begged for love. You are no longer required to bleed to be believed. I offered Jason a tool. He chose to lift it. I offered myself silence, and I chose to rest in it. That was the olive branch. Not a way back, but a way forward. You never forget the moment you realize you're free. Not the dramatic kind of freedom with fireworks or fanfare, but the quiet kind. The kind that feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. That moment, for me, came inside an airport. Of all places. I arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson earlier than I needed to. Out of habit, maybe, but also because I wanted time. Time to feel the difference. To see if the woman who stepped into the Delta Sky Lounge today was the same one who stood at that gate weeks ago, humiliated and heartbroken. She wasn't. I was wearing a white suit, clean, tailored, powerful without being loud. My hair was swept up. Minimal makeup, no distractions. I had become the woman I used to admire in passing, the one I thought I had to sacrifice, becoming just to be loved. Funny how letting go brings you closer to who you really are. The woman at the Sky Lounge desk greeted me with that glossy customer service smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Green. Welcome." Ms. Green. It still startled me how good that sounded, like I had returned to myself. I stepped into the lounge, and it was quiet, calm, the kind of place designed for people who choose peace over noise. Leather chairs, soft jazz, clinking glasses, the scent of citrus and new leather. I found a seat near the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the runways stretched out like pages waiting to be written on. A Delta jet lifted off in the distance, its roar muted behind thick glass. I sipped a glass of mint-infused water and let the silence wrap around me like a soft shawl. For once, no one was calling my name. No one needed anything from me, and I didn't feel guilty about it. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a family seated a few rows down. Parents, 2 kids. The mother trying to keep it all together while the husband scrolled his phone, clearly irritated. The daughter fidgeted. The son kept asking questions no one had the energy to answer. It was like watching a ghost of my former life. I'd been that woman, juggling peace and pressure, pouring from a cup that hadn't been refilled in years, always trying to create joy for others while running on fumes. The mother caught my eye, just for a second. I gave her a small, knowing smile, the kind that says, "You're seen, and someday it won't be like this." She didn't smile back, but she nodded. That was enough. My phone buzzed. A message from Jason. Jason. I finished the course, passed every module, built a budget for the bar I want to open, even researched licensing laws. I feel different, grounded, tired, but good tired. I know I can't undo everything, but I hope we can talk when you're back. Not about money. Just you and me. Also, I gave the kids back their college savings. Every penny. I figured it was time to do something right without being asked. I read the message 3 times, not because I doubted it, but because it confirmed something I'd been praying, quietly for, that he would rise, not for applause, not for rescue, but for himself. I took a moment. Then I typed, "Me. I'm proud of you. I'll be home for Christmas. Don't expect what used to be, but I'm here, and I love you." That's when it happened. That soft exhale, that full body release of a lifetime of guilt, fear, hope, and ache. I wasn't waiting for him to change anymore. He had, and I had too. I closed my eyes, let the sunlight warm my face, and allowed the tears to gather. Not of sorrow, not even joy. Just completion. A circle had closed. I reached into my carry-on and pulled out the small leather journal I had saved for him. Inside, I had written only one sentence on the first page. "This space is yours to build the life no one handed you." I had Julian arrange a delivery for it. No note. He'd know what it meant. As boarding was announced, I walked through the lounge slowly, taking one last look at the place where I finally accepted that stillness is not laziness, that solitude is not loneliness, and that boundaries are the purest form of love. On the plane, I was greeted by a flight attendant. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Green," she said. "Can I offer you a glass of champagne?" I smiled. "Yes, please. And can you make it a generous one?" She laughed. "Absolutely." I settled into my first-class seat, legs crossed, arms resting comfortably, and watched the ground fall away as the plane lifted into the sky. I thought of Jason, of Brittany, of Odessa, of all the people who once pulled on me like I was some endless rope. And then I thought of the garden I'd plant next spring, the art class I'd teach at the senior centre, the room I'd convert into a reading nook with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A life built for me, not in spite of anyone, but in honor of everything I'd overcome. As the plane soared above the clouds, I whispered softly, "I didn't punish my son. I freed him. I freed myself. And that is the most honest forgiveness I could offer." I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the future come to me. First class. Finally. And so, I walked away, not with bitterness in my chest, but with peace in my palms. I didn't burn bridges. I simply stopped repairing the ones no one else cared to cross. This wasn't a story of revenge through destruction. It was a story of boundaries, of choosing silence over screaming, clarity over chaos. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standards. And in doing so, I didn't lose my family. I simply gave them the chance to grow on their own terms. If this story echoed something inside you, a memory, a wound, a boundary you never dared to draw, tell me, have you ever had to choose peace over pleasing? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below, not for drama, but for truth. Because sometimes healing begins when someone finally says, "Me too."